Being personal, God has consciousness and will. But what could he possibly see or want as the first cause? Why do Christians say that this is related to God being a Trinity? How can one God be three persons? Welcome to the Seeker's Tavern. We will investigate this topic by asking the following questions. What is our consciousness and will? What does God see and want, and how does that differ from our abilities? And how is that related to the Holy Trinity? This tavern is a welcome place for all seekers of truth, so grab a pint and feel free to comment on any of the points I make. What is our consciousness and will? Consciousness is the ability to perceive the world internally, as a subjective experience. For instance, if I look at an apple, the apple is there, but its image is also inside of my mind. This image came from the apple towards me, so we can say that is the movement of an image from something towards the individual. On the other hand, free will is a type of ability that allows us to take action and make changes to the world. I see the apple and now I want to eat it. So there is an image inside of my mind of me eating the apple, then I go and eat it, and the image becomes reality. This image went from my mind towards the apple, so we can say that is the movement of an image from the individual towards something. Both consciousness and will are the movement of an image between an individual and something, just in opposite directions. An important part to notice is that first, I must see the apple before I can decide that I want to eat it. There is an order to the abilities of the person. First, I must see something before I can decide that I want to act upon it. The second important thing to notice is that after I take a bite from the apple, the world changes. So now I see a different image from my consciousness. This causes a feedback loop where I see something, change it, I see the results, maybe change them some more, and so on until I'm satisfied. The consciousness and will help to explain how we as personal beings can get to know the world and reshape it to our liking. They help to understand all the sciences that are a manifestation of consciousness and all the humanities that are a manifestation of the will. What does God see and want, and how does it differ from our abilities? Since God is the first cause, there was nothing but himself prior to creation. So the only thing God could possibly see is himself. Likewise, since the only thing God can see is himself, God can only possibly want himself. As strange as that may sound, this is the only possible option. However, these are not just mere images like they are for us. When I see an apple, the image of the apple inside of my mind is not a perfect reflection of it. I have a visual impairment, I can't see in full 3 dimensions, nor can I simulate all the biological processes occurring in the apple. However, God is different. As discussed in the previous video, God must be perfect because the first cause cannot have any limitation or imperfection. So if God saw an apple, the image of the apple within God's mind would be exactly the same. It would be the apple. How is that related to the Holy Trinity? Since God can only see and want himself in a perfect way, then the image of himself within his consciousness is God, and the image of himself within his will is also God. But God must be single, right? How can it be? Are there 3 gods? Well, no. They are all one God. First of all, there is no difference between them since they are perfect images. And secondly, the images within God are not separate from him, much like the image of an apple inside of my mind is not separate from my mind. So there is one God, but in 3 persons. But if they are exactly the same, how can we say that there are 3 rather than 1? Doesn't something need to be different to be distinct? Yes, but only in nature, not in where it comes from. The 3 persons of God are not different in nature. They are only different in the order which they came to be. The first person is first and doesn't come from anywhere. The second person comes from the intellect of the first person. Since you have to see something before you can want it, the third person must come from both the image of God, the second person, and the will of God, the first person. It's much like the north and south pole of a magnet. They are inseparable, but they have different directions. Therefore, God is one, but in 3 persons. In summary, consciousness and will are the movement of an image to and from the individual respectively. Since God is first, he can only see and want himself, though unlike us, he does so perfectly. The 2 images of God in God's consciousness and will are perfect and therefore also God, making up the one God in 3 persons, the Holy Trinity. This still leaves many unsolved questions though. If God is one perfect being, Where does creation come from? It's not like God could take a look at creation for inspiration before creating it. Everything in creation is limited, but God alone is perfect in all ways. So where could the image of imperfection come from a perfect God? How could God create something out of nothing? What is the act of creation anyway? Let me know in the comments.